time. My remarks today are going to be a little bit around the technology side of the impact on in employee experience, and really talking about the difference between what end users feel in terms of their interaction with their technology in their workplace, and what IT can actually see, and then talking about how we can bridge the divide and some new technology that's coming about that really help IT move from being reactive to proactive. So let me just dive in here. So the question is, why does digital experience matter? And there was a survey done by the University of Oxford that really drilled into the digital experience, employee experience, and why it matters. And what they found is organizations with highly engaged employee experience, meaning focused on employee experience, had more and it freed up time for users to spend working on their respective jobs, because the technology didn't get in the way of their computing. Less employee turnover, because one of the reasons that people get frustrated with organizations is when the technology that they're given it gets in the way of them doing their jobs, and ultimately greater profitability. So this is some of the reasons that companies are focusing on digital employee experience, and why it matters is because at the end of the day, we are more and more dependent upon technology to do our jobs, to accomplish what we've been trying to do, meet our goals, satisfy our customers. And when that technology doesn't perform, it gets in the way of us doing a good job, and it frustrates us as employees. So that's part of the reason it matters. Now, as I mentioned, the technology represents 30% of the overall experience that a user has with the company. So why is this a problem, and what can we do? And really what exists is a big gap between what IT wants to be delivering and ultimately versus what they're actually able to deliver. And the reason this gap exists is because at the end of the day, IT doesn't actually see all the problems that a user is having. It relies fundamentally on the user calling IT and telling IT that they're having a problem. We all know, like, you're having an issue, got to pick up the phone and call the service desk. And that's sort of the thing that people do as last resort, and or major things. And in fact, if we look at kind of what IT sees, is only the things that are reported to it. So if we look kind of above the line, what IT sees is users calling. What they don't see is slowness, in this remote worker world, VPNs, Citrix sessions, things like that, intermittent issues, app crashes, downtimes, reboots, blue screens, poor video quality. We're all now doing lots of Zooms and Teams and things like that, forever boot times. A lot of these problems are never reported to IT, or reported spottily, because eventually the users sort of just kind of kludge through it. And really, it's not IT's issue necessarily. Well, it is IT's issue, but it's not necessarily their fault in some ways, because they don't actually see these things unless you tell them about them, unless the users tell them about them. So we call this a blind spot, and the consequences of this blind spot really are around, one, they can't fix what they don't see, what they don't know about. So ultimately, they can't fix something that they don't know about it. A lot of times these problems manifest themselves in harder to handle issues and things of resolving things. Ultimately, it gives them IT has a trouble like being able to understand what it needs to drive out cost savings in terms of what software and hardware people are using. And there's a lot of squeaky wheel syndrome that goes along, that somebody is very loud, and they report to IT often that they're having problems, and IT doesn't know whether it's a squeaky wheel or is it really an issue, because they don't really have the data and the information behind it to understand that. So they kind of have to resolve on, work on emotion. And ultimately it affects, and as that survey pointed out, it ultimately affects the retention rate of employees and the happiness of employees. Because as we said before, people are relying on technology to do their jobs. And if the technology gets in the way of doing their jobs, it's very frustrating, because ultimately careers are dependent upon that and all sorts of things, and productivity. So these are some of the consequences of having this blind spot. Now, I guess we wouldn't be here if there wasn't the good news, is there's a journey in how to close this blind spot. And it really revolves around a couple of different things. One of them is closing the blind spot. Ultimately, though, it's moving from this concept of being reactive, which basically the cycle is somebody submits a ticket, IT reacts, and they try to remediate it. That's how it works now. I mean, really, it starts with IT gives you a device. You don't know if that's the right device for someone. You don't really have a planning system for it, but they give you something, then you use it. And if you have a problem, you call them. But outside of that, there's not really another interaction. So the idea is that we're going to move from that model to more of a proactive model, where we're getting and we're closing that blind spot by having detailed telemetry and information and actions on the end user environment, by having a system that basically can sit alongside the user on their device and can understand how things are performing from their perspective, and ultimately then give that to IT. So IT has that visibility proactively. So the user doesn't have to pick up the phone and call the service desk when the VPN is disconnecting 3 times a day, or their apps are crashing, or they're getting blue screens, or these other things that sort of happen to users all the time that they just don't report. IT will see those reports. And then going further, you really start to then aggregate these things into patterns, and then you can able to widely fix things across the whole estate without users ever actually having to be and report them, and then ultimately transforming it. So that's really the sort of how you start to do that. And as we kind of move into talking a little bit about how you make this leap from reactive to proactive, it really starts with visibility. Like, let's get good visibility of what's going on. Let's get a digital experience score that's measuring the productivity of the platform for the users, the app crashes and things like that. And we built a score based upon many, many years of experience that approximates from a numbers perspective, like quantifiable, what the experience of people are getting. And then we combine that with quantitative, because we can survey users dynamically and pull these things together in sort of a digital experience score. So one is getting visibility, close that visibility gap. So you now proactively, from an IT perspective, you understand, what are my users getting? And then you can say, okay, somebody's yelling, are they really getting a bad experience? Because sometimes people just are having a bad day and they're going to yell at you, and maybe it's not bad, but maybe it is. So this allows you to sort of normalize that and really understand across your entire fleet how things are going. So it starts with that, but then you can go further, and really then it's about, and we have an AI ops engine, which is basically takes all these sensors that detect all these problems that people are having. We've got thousands of them that run in the background, no setup, automatically, and basically it correlates them and allows IT to see hotspots of problems in their user environment. I'm seeing we're having a VPN issue in Brussels. We're having a Wi-Fi home networking issue with our Comcast subscribers. We're having, be able to see specific things across the environment. So to really help IT proactively pinpoint things. And then you have a system that you could do something about it. So we have a concept of 3 kinds of healings. A self-healing, which basically the user can just click on an icon, and for things that have been authorized for users to do, simple things, they can click a button, fix things. Things like, I don't know, your hard drive is full. That's a simple user. You hit a button, it does it for you. Things that users can fix. You can have a setting that goes in when their Wi-Fi signal is weakening and it's causing issues. Move closer to your Wi-Fi access point. Things like that. We do self-healing. We have the concept of assisted healing, which basically the service desk basically can quickly apply fixes to the user. We have the concept of mass healing, where you say, I found an issue across my entire environment. You can attach that and fix lots of machines at once. And then we have auto healing, which is the ultimate, which is basically we notice something in the environment, we just fix it based upon a sensor, because you can attach a heal to a sensor. The other thing that's key is grouping. Within the system, we have the concept of personas that basically take the user community and groups them together based upon automatically through an algorithm, based upon their application usage, and based upon their locations and things like that. So we can create auto grouping so that you can then compare different sorts of users and then be able to, see how your user community is performing. And you want to be able to integrate it directly into the sort of tools that IT is currently using. ServiceNow is a popular one, which a lot of our customers are using. So we integrate the technology directly into the tools that the IT folks are using so that the experience is seamless. So there's not this context switching all over the place. So these are sort of our view on how you would make that leap. And with that, you need a platform, and this is our platform behind the scenes that kind of runs in the cloud. It basically runs, you need to run on every device that the user's on, because ultimately to understand the user's digital experience, you need to understand where they are. It's not good enough to just be on their one device, but it's not on their other device. You would really want to holistically understand it. So we support a number of operating systems, and we think that's key. So things like Windows and Android and Mac, Linux, and then all the VDI platforms, virtual desktop infrastructure platforms. We want to understand those. We run on thin clients and others. You want to be able to also tie in, as I mentioned before, into existing infrastructure. So we have a whole API set that integrate in with the existing IT ecosystem. So when you bring in this digital experience cloud into your environment, it sort of ties into IT's environment. And we believe this is key. So I just wanted to quickly touch on some customers and what they're doing across a variety of different infrastructure industries. So for instance, banking, we have a banking customer that really used the data to look at IT asset utilization. So this is really understanding when people are using things and not using things, and you're paying for licensing. Because you now have the detailed usage of an app, you can understand and get savings that way. We have a public sector client that has avoided umpteen hours of 11K hours of downtime after we found a bunch of app crashes that were correlated through the sensors, correlating crashes across their environment, and tons of productivity saved. We've got a transportation client, and there's a quote here from them, but providing the wealth of information that comes with having this visibility that we provide as a byproduct, you can look at lots of things across lots of different groups of users, and you can start to be more proactive. And then there's others across a variety of different industries: insurance, food and beverage, and energy, telecom. It really is a cross-vertical sort of solution, because everybody is depending upon technology to do their jobs, and providing this sort of visibility is absolutely key. And things like improving the digital experience score. Insurance company that basically within 30 days identified a handful of things that were really hurting users that they just didn't see. They didn't know about them, and because users didn't really report them, it just was hidden. But because we deployed the technology, we were able to do that. Food and beverage, they had a huge VDI environment that when they moved the virtual desktop environment, when people moved to working from home, they quickly had to stand up. So you had to right size the environment. How big are the servers? How many users on a server? How much memory? How much disk? All that sort of stuff. How much networking? So people help with that. And then afterwards, how is it performing? What kind of experience are people getting from it? Energy client was really all about the industry calls something shift left. I don't know if it's a term familiar with other people, but the concept is you want to resolve the issue as close to the first contact with the customer as possible, because the longer the issue stays open, the more expensive it becomes. And then telecom, basically in a highly in Germany, in a highly regulated worker council environment, we're able to anonymize the data, so it doesn't need to, because we're looking at patterns. You can anonymize the data and still get value. So you're not getting individual users, but you're seeing trends across users, and you're able to identify things like, in this particular case, a network bottleneck. So these are some of the cases that our customers are using this sort of digital experience solution to do that. So I just wanted to say some of the key capabilities that are driving these solutions is one, sort of this foundational layer. There needs to be it's really a big data problem. There's massive amounts of data, and I'm going to get into the details, but we have a patented edge approach for gathering massive amounts of data and analyzing that data through our sensor intelligent analytics layer that basically takes this data and mines it and streamlines it, that then goes into the cloud platform, so that at the end of the day, at the top level, there's one score that indicates how users are performing. But that score is built on thousands and thousands of metrics. So we want to make it as simple for IT to consume, but then make it detailed on the detail enough so that it actually means something, and that user experience score. So these are kind of the three capabilities that we view are key in driving these things. And if you're interested in learning more about the space in general, I would highly recommend reading the Forrester New Wave, the end user experience management. Gartner calls this area digital experience management. Obviously the analysts cover them in different ways and call them different things, but this is one from just sort of end of last year, so it's very recent. And it talks about the space and who's in it. We're particularly proud of our placement there in terms of our strengths, but you can read more as a consumer and why this area is important and how other customers use it. I'd highly recommend reading that if you're interested in more data. And in closing, I would say, don't just join this digital revolution, experience revolution. Everybody's talking about it. You could lead it, and really, when you talk about it in your employees, and you can do that by one, eliminating your blind spots. That's absolutely key, because right now, if you don't have a solution like this, you don't see what the users are seeing. You have a blind spot. So just by closing that blind spot, you will find a lot of information. You will get a lot of insight, and you'll start to become more proactive. And then so that becomes your next step. It's really like, let's move from that 3-step process to that more holistic process where you're moving from a reactive organization to a proactive one, because now you have the data, you have the sensors, you have the pattern matching that's telling you here's the hotspots and the problems and the information. And then you're able to move to that. And ultimately, then you could drive your transformation, your digital transformation. You're now just bound by your vision, not just technology. And that really drives it for you. So eliminate the blind spots, move reactive to proactive, and really sort of drive the transformation. And with that, I think those are my remarks.